Hey, cool kids. Welcome back to the Cool Grandpa podcast. Today, we are diving into a world of wonder, laughter, and connection. Our guest is magician and author and all around fantastic storyteller, Allan Kronzek. He's the author of Grandpa Magic, a book that's less about the sleight of hand and more about heart. Whether you've never performed a trick in your life or you're already a card carrying member of the Magic Circle, Allan's insights will show you how a little magic can go a long way in building strong bonds with your grandchildren, the neighborhood kids, and even spark mentorship, creativity, and joy. Now, before we jump into this conversation, I would love to remind you, please go over to cool-grandpa.us, check out the bookstore. There's some fantastic merchandise over there that I'm sure that you as a grandfather or the grandfather in your life would really enjoy having. I've got the polo shirts on that you can see in my interviews that are over on YouTube, but we've also got some great hats. We've got some coasters, some tumblers, some just fantastic merchandise that I think grandpas are going to enjoy. So go over and check that out. That helps support the show. And without further ado, let's jump into this conversation with Allan. Hi, Allan. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm happy that you've chosen to join us, and I'm looking forward to learning more about how grandfathers and other people can use magic to build connections with kids.
That's what I'm here for.
As we get started, I'd love for you to give us a little bit of an introduction of yourself. And then, in particular, I know you've written a number of books, but what inspired you to write Grandpa Magic? And I'm just holding it up for the folks on YouTube.
Okay, we'll skip all the other books, maybe come back to them later. The inspiration for Grandpa Magic came in two ways. One, I was looking for a new project. I had just finished a book for magicians. And a frequent occurrence when I perform socially or, I would perform at libraries and places like that. And people would come up to me in the end and say, "Hey, Allan, can you teach me a quick trick I can show the grandkids?" Just something, a really simple trick I can. And I could and I did. But it was my wife who was the source of most of my good ideas, said, maybe that's the book. Maybe that's the new book because you're asked that question. It seems, like a real need. And I thought it was a great idea. So I wrote up a proposal and sent it to Workman Publishing because they do beautiful illustrations. And they were intrigued by the idea. Oh, first I should tell you, I did my research. How many grandparents are there? 70 million at the time. And they spend how much money on their grandkids every year? $4,000. And they're the most important people in the grandparents' life. And so there is a market for this book. But the concept of the book was amazing grandparents, how to amaze and amuse and make yourself a superhero with the grandkids. And the publisher said, there are plenty of books for grandmothers to relate to their grandkids. Let's focus. There is another market, which is grandfathers. So let's just concentrate and target the book. We'll say in the book, of course, grandmothers can do this as well. So can aunts and uncles, but we're going to address it to grandfathers. So I said, cool. So you do what you do when you are working on a book. I submitted several sample chapters and the concept, which was going to be maybe a third magic tricks and a third amusing stunts that you could do anytime, anywhere. At the dinner table, if you're out for pizza with the kids, using stuff you have, loose change, $1 bill, tableware, napkins, all kinds of, there's tons of amusing, really charming things you can do. So we were going to make another third that. And the final third would be riddles and brain teasers, which are akin to magic because they require thinking outside the box. And that's one of the lessons of magic. So that was the idea. And they bought the book and I wrote the book having no conception of what the title was. Nobody said different title. And having no idea that at some point they decided that they were going to translate what I thought were going to be photographic illustrations into cartoons and that I was going to be a cartoon version of myself and known as Grandpa Magic. So this is like a shock to my identity. I had never, I'm not a grandfather, alas, but I have turned into one. It was a long path getting here, but it was really surprising to see all of those cartoon me's and like coming alive as a comic book. And it was a great move on the publisher's part. I have no problem with it. And so that's how the book came to be. It was
Okay.
originally, I should say, twice as long, but we cut it in order to add more illustrations and make sure everything was crystal clear.
No, it's very easy. I've been going through it and it's very easy to follow. And I think the illustrations are perfect. I think the cartoon or the illustration really gives it a sense of warmth as well as some humor within the book as well.
Yeah, I hope people find the book funny in parts. That's part of my intention.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I want to ask you, how should, we'll stick with grandfathers, but we know everybody can use the book. How should we go about thinking in terms of using this book to build up that connection with our grandchildren, our children, maybe the kids in the neighborhood, whatever?
It's a complex question. Part of it is how often you see your grandkids. For some grandparents, it's a rarity, once or twice or three times a year. And, for those, I've discovered through the grandparents I know, often the grandfather has no conception of how to relate to the kid. What do they have in common? And so one idea was to give you some real interesting things that you can just do with the kid. And if you see your grandkids more often, what you want to do is just develop a repertoire of tricks. If you learn magic tricks, it's really simple enough just to say to a grandkid, depending on their age, you want to see something interesting? You want to see something cool? You want to see something mysterious? The answer is yes. And so you perform, you do something that seems to be impossible. And depending on the age of the audience, that influences what material you do. I divided the book into the audiences into believers and skeptics. So for me, the believers are kids like 6 and under. And there are tricks you can do for toddlers. I mean, one of my favorites is just taking a napkin, a cloth napkin, and in 2 seconds you can form it into a bunny puppet. And you then can relate to a toddler as a ventriloquist would or as a puppeteer would. You talk to the puppet talks back, puppet talks to the kid. And the kid will accept this as, real, more or less. And if you make a coin disappear or take it out of their ear, a 4-year-old will think you can do that. A 9-year-old will know it's a trick. These are the skeptics already. They know they've been hoodwinked about a few things. Maybe the tooth fairy's not real. Santa Claus isn't real, and neither is magic.
Yep. They've had a few too many wooden nickels.
So they'll challenge you on that, and usually that comes with, so show me how'd you do that? How'd you do that? And then it's an option as to whether you reveal how you did it or not. If you reveal too much too soon, you are giving up the magic powers that you just demonstrated. Not that you should believe you have real magic powers, but you are a special person doing something very special. And if you say, oh, I just did so and so, it becomes ordinary. So you're spoiling this moment. And for a lot of younger grandkids, you want to sustain that moment. You want to let them live in the magic. And so the next time you see them or have another encounter, you can do something else. And there's just a lot of material for various ages that you can trot out. If you're out for pizza, for example, with the kids, and the kid pulls out his phone, and we're talking a 10-year-old, or wait a second, smarty pants, let me see if you can do this. And you take out 6 coins, 6 pennies, and you propose something, and the proposal is make 2 rows of 4 coins each using just 6 pennies. And it seems impossible, but you can do it, and there's a trick to it. But the kid will take up, my experience and the experience of people who have tried this is the kid will take up the challenge and see, can I figure this out? And how do you do it? And then they'll show it to their friends. And more in the out for pizza things you can do with stuff with the tableware. You can take a spoon and make it cry. You can change a knife into a fork. You can do more, hypnotize a napkin. It goes to sleep. It's very funny. It depends on the age of the kid. With the older kids, there's some card tricks that are very difficult to figure out. Not difficult to do, but difficult to explain. That'll intrigue a teenager who otherwise couldn't care less about magic. And my hope in writing the book, and I found this to have happened with many people who use it, is the kid becomes really interested in magic. And then it turns into a mentoring thing where you can work with somebody on the magic and, work collectively and help. It's very empowering for a kid to learn magic. It's really one of the best hobbies you could possibly have, in my opinion. And another thing in the book that really makes a good relationship, if you see your grandkid often enough, is to put together an act that the two of you can do at a family gathering. So there's a complete act in there for grandpa and, let's say, a kid 7 and up. And it's a mind reading act, and the kid is the mind reader. And they go out of the room, and the adults and whoever's there decide on many things, and the mind reader comes back and reveals what they are without eavesdropping. That'll develop a close relationship with the person you're working with.
Oh, sure. I did a lot of travel in my previous career. And one of the things that would always pop up at airports, especially in the South, and in Chicago and New York, you get the afternoon thunderstorms, and all of a sudden your flight's delayed 20 minutes, an hour. And inevitably, there's a young mom, a young family with some toddlers there that just don't want to have to deal with this delay. And when I would travel, typically I had some little objects and things in my briefcase that I could pull out and show. Maybe it's a little flashlight that's attached to the keychain. Great for a little kid. But in this book, I'm like, I would have been so far ahead to have learned like 3 magic tricks that I could just sit there and go, "Hey, mom, is it okay if I show, your child something while we're all in the gate area?" And to immediately get that kid from stop fussing and wanting to run around and giving mom a headache to all of a sudden being intrigued about, "Ooh, who's this stranger with the gray beard that's, doing the pennies or doing the rubber band tricks or doing some, a couple of different things."
Exactly.
That changes the whole flight around.
It does. And funny you should mention it. I've done that very thing, and not only for kids, but when I'm just waiting at the airport, I always have a deck of cards in my hand. So I'm always practicing. And somebody often will say, "Oh, are you playing cards or you tell fortunes?" And no, I do. Oh, let me see one, a magic
Right,
trick.
right, right.
And then, and the next thing you know, you can have a crowd around you.
Well, that's awesome. Hey, I wanted to ask you about the proper attitude about doing and performing magic. I mean, it's one thing to just kind of want to, I think, entertain, but I think you've hit on, there's kind of a mindset, a little bit of an attitude that you want to have in, I guess, selling the tricks, right?
Sure, you have to have a presentational mode, And, for me personally, it took years to find out how I want to present magic. When I was a little kid, and this will applies to little kids who are learning from their grandparents or whatever, the kid will get up there and act like a magician. He may have a magic set and he's got a wand and he knows a trick and he waves the wand and something disappears and everybody politely applauds. And sometimes they're very surprised that they don't know where it went because it's just a kid, but they can get fooled anyway. And all of that's perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable for the kid to present magic that way. But as you get older and older, a 9-year-old can't to another 9 year old pretend that he has magic powers because you're not going to believe me, and it's not magic. So what is it? Well, it could simply be something cool, something interesting, something mysterious. So when I perform in general, the last thing I want anybody to believe is I have some kind of powers, supernatural powers. I can do mind reading tricks that are very astonishing. How could you possibly know? But there's a method, and I'm not going to pretend that there isn't. It's just if we're doing this, we're engaged in a piece of theater or we're engaged in play. Magic is basically play. You want to play? Let's come into my playground and let's play pretend. Pretend I could go like this and it disappears. Oh, it does. Funny when you pretend things. So, for me, that's the reasonable way for a kid to present magic and not act like he's an adult or act like it's real. It doesn't matter that it's not real. It's surprising and wonderful and mysterious and extremely enjoyable to see impossible things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Question I've got for you when it comes to working with children, young adults, etc. Is there typically age ranges for certain tricks that make sense? And where I'm going with it is that 6 year old, that 7 year old may still be working on fine motor skills when it comes to the fingers versus somebody much older. And so, are there different types of magic or tricks that are more, I don't know, easier for those groups?
Sure. I taught magic in summer camp for many seasons, and it was 8 and up. But if they thought they had a 7 year old who really, really wanted to be in this group, they would let the 7 year old as well. But for those kids, it was essential that they had some props. I purchased easy, simple to do magic tricks that kind of work themselves, and for many, that's just the right speed. Some of the tricks, many of the tricks are fooling. So they can. There's a trick called a coin slide, which I think you can buy for $1 or $2, which has a little slide in a compartment, and you put a penny in, and you slide it in, and you take it out, and the penny's gone. And so that's the trick. And for a lot of kids, that's wonderful and that's success and they've done something. But at the same time, in the class, there would be, fortunately, I had counselors helping me, and I'd say, okay, those who want to work on card magic, we're now going to come to this side of the room and I'm going to teach you one card trick, and you work on this and work on this, and we'll do it tomorrow again. And take those kids aside. And that's more complicated. There's nothing store bought. You have to remember the procedure and what the trick is. And also, a classic magic trick is the cups and balls, which are 3 cups and little balls, and they jump around and change places. And an 8 year old can learn to do that. And there's not regular Dixie cups from the five and dime, and I got little puff balls from the five and dime, and they can learn that. And that's a real routine and a skill trick, and it requires a lot of practice, well. But by the end of the, first week of coaching, the ones who were skilled at that came forth, and that's what they needed and they wanted. And the other group were happy just doing these simple tricks that work themselves. They didn't go home and practice. It just depends on what rings their bell.
Sure. Well, and it seems too, the way you were talking about that is the younger kids need to have some immediate success.
Yeah,
Like the store bought stuff, okay? Because if you go try to teach them the card tricks and they're getting frustrated because their hands aren't working right, or it's just a more involved process, they may become a little discouraged.
exactly so. Exactly so. You want them to win right away.
Awesome. Alan, I was remiss when we started about asking you about how you got interested in magic and how you became a magician.
From there to here is a long story with twists and turns. I became interested in magic when I was around 8 years old. It was a combination of things, but one of them was receiving a Misto magic set. I had sets. I had a chemistry set, I had an erector set, I had Tinker Toys, and I had a Misto magic set. And that's the one that really spoke to me. And I just loved everything about it. I liked the secrets. I liked how ingenious things were. Um, I was a shy kid, but I liked performing. I liked showing the tricks. I liked making something just disappear. And when you start out and you actually fool adults, it's a very satisfying thing. So I just stuck with it. And I had, as a youth, a heart murmur, and I was not allowed to do competitive sports. So what did I have to shine at? And it was magic. And my parents realized that and encouraged me. When we got every book out of the public library, my mom would drive me to the big library, Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh, and there was a magic store. And if I did well in school and did what I was supposed to do, I'd go to the magic store. So then I began doing magic shows for kids' shows. This is a typical path. You get to a magic store, you buy apparatus made for putting on kids' magic shows. They give you a script, they tell you what to do, what to say, and I did that. And the tricks, though, were good, but they were all store-bought tricks. And I did that until I went to college. I could still do kids show. When I did college, I gave it up. And I didn't get back until years later in my early 30s when I was married, had a kid, and my parents had said, I had a whole case at home of apparatus. And they said, we want to use that display case for other things. Get that stuff out of here. So I brought it to where I was now living, somehow started doing kids shows again because people found out I was interested in magic. And then somebody asked me to write articles for Cricket Magazine, a kids magazine, about magic. And so I did. And that eventually turned into a book called The Secrets of Alcazar, which was a how-to book for kids like 9, 10 and up. And that book did really well. It's unlike other magic books. There's only one trick per chapter, and there's a lot of theory about how you present things and other tricks of the trade. And it includes close-up magic and living room magic and even a couple of stage illusions, all of which you can do without going to a magic store. So I wrote that, and as I was getting back into magic, I started studying close-up magic, which is mainly sleight of hand. And now I'm living on Eastern Long Island, but I'm 2 hours from New York City, where there were at this time a couple of great masters. A guy named Tony Slidini, who you can see on Dick Cavett anytime on YouTube, an amazing magician. And I was very fortunate to study with him for a couple of years. And another master card magician named Frank Garcia. So now I'm somehow into this close-up magic, which is what I do these days.
Very cool. And I did have that question in the back of my mind and you were answering that. Were there magicians that you saw that kind of inspired you, and then later the ones that maybe helped you along with your work?
The magicians that first inspired me, well, one of my earliest memories was seeing a magician at a Cub Scout Blue and Gold. And there he was on stage, and I said, what's going on? I love this. And so I watched every magician I could possibly watch, mainly on TV. Ed Sullivan would have magicians on regularly. And there was a show back then with a guy named Al Baker called You Asked For It, where people would write in, I'd like to see so-and-so. I've heard such and such. And I think it was probably bogus, all of these requests, but a lot of magicians got on. So I would watch them there. And when I'm 13 years old, Blackstone Sr., a real Blackstone, comes to the Nixon Theater and does his whole stage show. It's just astonishing. I'd never seen big stage illusions before. So, and I read Houdini's books. So Houdini was an inspiration in the kind of person he was, and a man of all trades and a skeptic and exposing phony mediums and psychics, and all of that appealed to me. And then I told you I took these lessons and I got pretty good at it. And eventually I was invited to a magician's only invitational convention that happens every year called the 4F convention. Fector's Finger Flicking Frolic. And it is some of the best close-up magicians in the world. It's international, and you got to be invited. And I just came back at the end of April. And there I'm just exposed to the best magicians there are. And am I fooled? 90% of the time. There's just an incredible level of creativity currently in magic. So people don't run out of ideas, amazingly enough.
For sure. And one of the things that also strikes me as we're having this conversation, looking through the books, is as those kids start to move from believers to skeptics, do you think that there's also this kind of scientific inquiry going on, right? Like a little bit of like, well, how does this work? Well, what I can figure this out, where maybe they're not so intrigued about that process when it comes to their schoolwork and actually understanding how gravity works and how these different things. But to me, there's a little bit of this science or this inquiry that's being focused in on this.
Absolutely. Magic is critical thinking, and it is, what else was I going to say? It's critical thinking and problem solving. That's, when you create magic and thinking outside the box. For a number of years, I did school programs and library programs, and one of them was a science program. And it was quite popular on Long Island. I got booked a lot for a little workshop on the scientific method. And I used magic basically to ask the question, how do you know it's real? Can you believe what you see? How can you be misled? How do you jump to the wrong conclusions? And with lots of examples of magic tricks, but also perceptual illusions and things that happen to people. So just getting the idea across that just because you saw it doesn't mean you understand it or that it's even what you think you saw. So good question, because that's magic teaches critical thinking, and there's a long tradition earlier than Houdini of magicians becoming the rational ones. For a while, magicians presented themselves as wizards, but when you get to the 19th century and spiritualism and people claiming to have psychic powers and demonstrating them to scientists, you need magicians in there, to see, is there any deception going on here? So within the magic movement, there's a whole lot of skeptical magicians who belong to skeptic societies and spend a lot of time trying to teach critical thinking and exposing phony mediums and faith healers and others who are just using magic tricks, to take advantage of people as scams.
And it reminds me a little bit, there was a show that Penn and Teller did for a while that was where they tried to figure out a magician's trick about they would have these magicians come on their show, do it, and then Penn and Teller would try to figure it out. And it wasn't like to discredit or anything, but it was a case of like, here's two experts that are trying to, you know, oh wow, we haven't seen this before. How did they do it? How did they set it up?
That
And
show is still going strong.
is it
Yeah,
okay?
called Fool Us, and it's on the CW channel, and it's been really good for magic because Penn, who's the only one who speaks, will usually give an appreciative critique of the act,
Mhm.
and what was good about it, and oh, that part was original, and I like the way you did that, and then usually they will end up with, but you didn't fool us, and they drop in code words to make it so the performer understands that they do indeed understand how it's done. And if there's a dispute, by the way, the judges backstage know how it's done. And if you can't say, no, you're wrong, if Penn and Teller get it right. But a lot of magicians have gotten great exposure and bookings from being on Penn and Teller. And the same with America's Got Talent. There didn't used to be magicians on America's Got Talent. And then all of a sudden there were, and then one won, the Grand Prix or whatever it is. And all of that caused a renaissance in magic. Magic is very hot right now. Most big cities have several venues for close-up magic.
Well, that's awesome. I didn't quite know that it was having a renaissance, because I know, like, a lot of things, they ebb and flow, and taste change and whatnot. But
That'll
this is
be the
it's
case again, but for the moment, we're on the high.
good, good. I love that. Hey, could you share a story where you had a trick that went really right, and then maybe one where it went really wrong with the kids? And nothing super serious with the wrong part, like, somebody lost a leg or anything, but
I don't really have an example of things going really wrong, because most of the time I can save the day. No matter what goes wrong, it can be turned around. But what sometimes goes wrong is I'm doing something and for a kid, and he will say, I saw you do that, and that's not one card, that's two cards, so they will just blow the method and they'll be right. And there's nothing else, nothing I can do about that. I do a show every year. I live in the Hamptons, and there's a horse show every year called the Hamptons Classic, and they have Kids Day, and I perform in the kids' tent doing close-up magic. But some of the kids are so small that they're looking up, they're looking from beneath, which is not the point of view that was intended,
right.
so they see things they shouldn't see. So for me, those are the things that have gone terribly wrong. And things that go really right. I mean, there are some wonderful moments. I did a school show and I asked somebody to come up and help me. And the kid came up and he was learning disabled or whatever. He wasn't the right kid, it seemed. And I asked him to do something and he said, I can't do that. I can't do that. And there's a full auditorium full of people. And I looked at him and I said, you can. I can see you can do it. And he did it. And then the teachers came up to me afterwards and said, that was wonderful. He doesn't get stuff like that normally. And so I get that's a trick going enormously right. But I mean, I get tremendous satisfaction from that, having done that and having that reaction. Speaking of those kinds of reactions, when I was teaching the camp kids, some of them would go home and entertain their grandparents and really show off and really come into the spotlight in the course of a week. And I got, thanked for that as well. And when things go really, really right, what happens is coincidence and chance falls into place somehow to make whatever you're doing more amazing. It's hard to explain that without, giving a specific example. Or when you just ask somebody out of the blue to name a card, and they name a card that it was intended to be in the trick from the very beginning, except now it just I'm not explaining it well. Better than having them pick a card, and things just fall into place.
Sure, sure. No, that sounds amazing. And I was going to ask you too if you've had experience, and maybe what some of that experience and what some of the wisdom might be when a grandfather or whoever might be doing some tricks with a special needs child or grandchild. Like, have you had any experience where, like, hey, stay away from this type of magic because it might agitate a child, or this kind of magic really works well with maybe special needs or autistic kids?
No, I don't. I
Okay.
don't. If I were suggesting, thinking of something to do with kids with special needs, it would be one of those store-bought self-working tricks that they can do. You know,
Okay.
if they can put it in this way and then turn it around and put it in the other way, they will succeed. For some kids, and especially the younger kids, don't have the concept of deception, really. That's something is going on behind the scenes that they don't know about. I remember every Thanksgiving I do a show for my family. My cousin puts on this big thing. So I've been doing this for 30 years. And at the beginning, I thought I'm going to bring some of those self-working tricks to give to my cousin's kids who are now like 6 years old. And I get a trick, a wonderful trick where you have a little square box and a cube with colors on different sides. And you hold it behind your back, and the kid is supposed to put in the cube and remember what color is on top. And he puts the lid on, and you apparently see through it. You can't see through it, but you tell him what color is on. Red was on. You put red on top. Is that right? And it's right. And you can do it again. And it's puzzling how you know. So the kid loves it. And I said, now I'll teach you how to do it. So we go into the other room, and I explain when they put the lid on behind your back, you secretly take the lid off, turn the box, and put the lid on a side where it'll still appear to be on top if you hold it. And then you can bring it out and you can peek at it. And he's crushed. He's absolutely crushed. This is not, it's not real. You cheated. You cheated. And yes, I did, and that's what this, if you want to learn to amaze people, you have to cheat a little bit in this way, in the magic way. So I don't know how we ended up here, but which
Well,
you teach and what level they are at, it can have consequences.
okay. Okay. Yeah, I guess it's part of it is like with your experience, it's reading the room and reading your audience and what, if you have a lot of kids, especially maybe special needs kids where trying to explain or show the trick or do something might really take the magic away from them. Maybe you don't do that, or maybe they become even more engaged because they see it and then you show them how it's done and then they can turn around and they can do that as well.
If it's something they can actually do. I'm trying to remember because I did do a special needs workshop, only one. And I'm trying to remember what I taught. And it was simple card magic. And the feedback was that it was successful. I never saw the kids again, but I heard back. But I don't remember great detail what it
Yeah.
was I did. But the idea of performing for special needs kids, they will find it wonderful. Most of them will enjoy the performance without knowing how it's done. And maybe it's best to leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm thinking a little bit in terms of also that those ages where Christmas becomes something different, and I'll just leave it there where, as a father, grandfather, and you want that experience to continue as long as it can and have that. And so I think it's something very similar with when it comes to magic and kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree completely.
Now, how would you suggest and recommend? Obviously, we've got the Grandpa Magic book, but where would you recommend maybe grandpas that haven't been super, I don't know, playful for a long period of time to start to get engaged with doing some of the performances and picking up some of the tricks if they want to start to do that as part of their grandfather experience?
I think that, get the book. It's very reasonably priced. It's, I don't know, $15 on Amazon or less, and see if you're grabbed. The premises behind magic and the methods are clever and intriguing. And if it doesn't hook you, then maybe it's not for you. But I think, like the first trick in the book, is called How to Pull Any Small Object Out of Thin Air. And, well, how would you do that? So you can read the method and then you can do it pretty quickly. Any small object in the thing we illustrate is a piece of candy wrapped, a gumball wrapped in cellophane. And what the trick looks like is you show your hands empty, you roll up your sleeves, you reach into the air, you take out an invisible thing, you put it into your hand, and it materializes. And something, it wasn't there and now it's there. And it looks really, really good. And it's deeply fooling and it's easy. You need to practice in front of a mirror. But if granddad is reading that and says, I'm going to blow the kid's mind, I got to learn this, you can do that. And there's a routine called The Adventures of Ronnie the Rubber Band, and which is on YouTube, by the way, as The Adventures of Ronnie the Rubber Band. My publisher during COVID said, would you teach this trick? And we'll put it out to our mailing list. And so I teach the trick. But it's what we call a magic routine. There isn't just one part of it. It's a 3-part trick where all you need is a couple of rubber bands, and you could cause them to jump from finger to finger and to jump over a fence and to move around and crawl into your fist. But the way it needs to be presented is with theater. Ronnie the Rubber Band isn't a piece of elastic. He's entering the Rubber Band Olympics, and he's your friend. And this is a trick for like 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. And again, grandpa, somebody new in magic, can learn to do it relatively quickly. And then you try it out. And if the kid lights up, you have a winner. And that'll just encourage learning more and more and more. So my suggestion is get it, learn something that appeals to you, learn a few table tricks, It depends on the context that when you see the kids. One of my favorite things, this takes a little more practice, but if you're out and there's a dinner roll on the table, you can just take it, throw it on the floor as if it was a ball, and it'll bounce into the air and you catch it. Now, it's not supposed to bounce, but you can do, or you can make it float. You can cover it with a napkin and it'll float in thin air. So I guess it's either you're grabbed by this kind of thing or you aren't. I certainly was, and I haven't let go since. And a lot of guys, boys, start with magic for a while. They have a magic kit, they're interested. Then girls come along and whatever happens after that. But they get back into it when I used to do that. And now I can do it again. So, my hope is that it'll just revive and turn into mentoring if it does, because there's nothing like working with a kid. Magic is so universal. There is no age barrier. I go to a couple of conventions, and one of them is very open to young magicians coming there. Some come with their parents. It takes place in Columbus, Ohio every year. It's called Magi Fest. And in addition to shows and lectures, there's a lot of hanging out time. And there are rooms, and you see people of all ages hanging out together as if there is no age barrier. It's the 80-year-old guy is talking to the 14-year-old kid or the 12-year-old. They got cards in their hand and they're just showing each other stuff. There's no age barrier. And in magic, there's no snobbery. You have college professors and plumbers and people from all walks of life just loving the same thing. So when you get a bunch of magicians together, age is just irrelevant.
That's awesome. Alan, as we start to wrap things up, I know you've written a few other books. Would you mind mentioning those and where we can find those as well?
I would not mind at all. One of them, I was fortunate enough to write a New York Times bestseller, which was called The Sorcerer's Companion, a guide to the magical world of Harry Potter. For the YouTube viewers, I shall hold up a copy. So that's what that looks like.
Very cool.
And what this is, when the Harry Potter books came out, I was doing a lot of school shows, and there was always a Q&A, and a lot of the Q&A was, is magic real, or which is real? These are kids who had read Harry Potter. And I tried to answer the question, and then I thought, that's my next book. There is no middle school level book that talks about the idea of magic and witchcraft and what the history is and what's real and what's not real. So I thought, I'll write that. And I started outlining the book, and I thought, I'm going to include Harry Potter in this also. And my daughter was at Princeton at the time, a historian. I said, you want to write this with me? And she said, sure, but, we ought to frame this all in Harry Potter terms. And brilliant idea. So the book is not about the characters in Harry Potter. It's not about the plots. It's about magic lore. So we went through the books and wrote down everything that has to do with magic, spells and potions and the invisibility cloak and the magic mirror and all the magical creatures and where did they come from. J.K. Rowling did a huge amount of research. When I was reading the book, I recognized things that I think 99% of the readers would not know. Like in book one, there's a character named Nicholas Flamel who invents the Sorcerer's Stone. I knew he was real. There was such a person. And I had read in alchemy. And so we did deep dives into the sources of magic lore in folklore, in history, in literature, and in historical practice. So, and everything's from a skeptical, rational point of view. So it was very well received. And kids who love Harry Potter just love learning more about this stuff and where it came from. And I learned about this stuff. I used to haunt magic bookstores as a teenager. I mean, used bookstores as a teenager. Oh, where are the magic books? By which I meant magic tricks.
Mm-hmm.
They're over there. But that was anthropology, and they were the practices of magical beliefs. So I thought, well, that's interesting too. So I read that stuff as well as the magic books and recognized all that stuff in the Harry Potter books. So that was a hit. And there's this one called 52 Ways to Cheat at Poker. And when the poker was really hot on TV a number of years ago, all these tournaments, I thought, well, there hasn't been an update yet in recent years on how cheaters cheat. I mean, there's a subtitle, How to Detect Them and Protect Yourself Against Them. And I thought this was a really topical book for the time. So I wrote that book, and it was really well received by magicians and a few others. But the poker magazines that I expected to run reviews of it wouldn't touch it. They wouldn't touch it because cheating was in the title. We don't want to hear about cheating. But for me, what this book is about isn't cheating at poker. It's the trickster imagination. It's problem solving. Cheating at poker is just how can you devise invisible methods for stealing from your friends, and there's nothing good about that, but it's very inventive. And so is magic. And so the trickster imagination is everywhere all the time. Everybody has one. We all use it all the time. So that's what that book was about. And then I wrote another book for magicians that's just about card magic of my own devising. And that's, you have to have some intermediate sleight of hand skills to learn that material. And I wrote a big tome called The Book of Powers that was never published. It was commissioned to go into a program to help disadvantaged youth and youth at risk. But that project fell apart. It wasn't my project, but I was commissioned to write the book. But maybe one of these days it will come out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully so. And Alan, where's the best place for people to connect you, to follow you, to be up to date with what you're doing?
Well, the grandpamagic.net is my website. But as far as keeping up with me, I don't do a blog. I don't do social media. I'm writing another book for my original card magic for magicians. But anyone who gets Grandpa Magic or just feels like writing to me, that's great. I'm happy to interact with people, And the cool thing about close-up magic and magic with kids is it's all interactive. It's relationship. It really is. All the magic I do is what we call audience centric. It's on us. It's on you. It's about you. It's not about me. It's not look what I can do. It's look at this cool thing or look what we can do together. And that's my slant on things. I'm not the only one who feels that way. But so yeah, get in touch if you have questions or anything you want to know.
Will do. And I'll be sure to put those links into the show notes as well. So if people are out driving around or whatnot, we'll make it super simple. They can go to the episode and the show notes, and it'll have links over to your site and your book,
Great.
as well as we'll put the YouTube link for the Adventures of Ronnie, the Jumping Rubber Band,
Yes.
into that. So grandpas can take a quick look.
Absolutely. That'd be great.
Yep. Well, Alan, is there anything about magic, anything about connecting with young people through the use of magic that you would like to talk about that I haven't brought up yet?
I think you pretty much brought everything up. I guess what popped into my mind is how satisfying it is for me to teach magic. I have young students and I just love it. They seeing them develop. I love the process in which you take what I show you and then you make it your own. Add it to what the other interests you may have. And just seeing a kid develop and then they learn things on their own and bring them to me and maybe fool me and it's I enjoy this very much, the interaction, of okay, I'll show you this, you show me that, and so as I mentioned, I don't have grandkids, but this is the closest I come.
Well, this is awesome, and I know this is going to be a big help, and hopefully inspire grandfathers to use magic as a way to build connections with their grandchildren and even the grandchildren's friends that might be hanging out. That's always the great part of being a cool grandpa is having a couple of tricks and a couple of treats up your sleeve.
Yeah, apparently on the book jacket copy it says you'll be the coolest guy on the block,
Well, that's awesome. That's
and you
awesome
will, and you will if you actually learn this stuff.
for sure. Alan, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. I really have enjoyed this conversation.
Me too, Greg. Thanks so much.